Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Bring It Back. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that were canceled and or short-lived that I would like to see get brought back in some shape or form. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series Y: The Last Man. Really quickly, if you're unfamiliar with what the series is, basically all males, not just human, but animals, the male species has been wiped out after a virus or something kind of gets released. We don't really know the full context of what it was, but it wiped out all male species. Hence why the series is called what it is, because the series actually has multiple meanings, which to me I thought was kind of a fascinating thing. Why? Because obviously men, as in the Y chromosome, because the only man that's still alive is one particular man, and his name is Yorick. Hence, that's the double meaning for the Y. So I just think it's kind of like a fascinating double meaning for the series. But it's this interesting post-apocalyptic world of just like society falling after more than half the population dies, and not, once again, not just on them, but also for the sake of animals as well. But basically it revolves around York being the only one that survived, and there's an agent, her name is 355. She basically belongs to like this secret government organization. It's up to her to take him to find a scientist, a geneticist named Allison Mann, and help try and figure out, for one, what made Yorick survive. I mean, it wasn't even just Yorick. His monkey Ampersand is also the one that survived as well, also a male. So finding out why these two survived and how their circumstances could be used to replicate the male species and kind of bring them back. And obviously it doesn't just stop with like male humans, but also the male species amongst other animals. It's a very unique take on a post-apocalyptic situation, because I don't think there's any other series that's really done something of this nature. It's just an interesting story about just like, you know, like any post-apocalyptic situation of like, you know, you become like your truest self at this time. A lot of people use this opportunity to reinvent themselves, make up for, like, you know, certain before the world fell apart, like who they were versus who they get to be now. And sometimes some people get to reinvent themselves, other people get to be the truest version of themselves, and that it's just a really interesting post-apocalyptic story. But since I am talking about it, there is this sad news that the show was canceled after its first season. The news actually came out a couple weeks ago at the time of me recording this, right before the day of the 8th episode airing, because this was released week to week. Except for like the first 3 episodes. So I was kind of bummed to hear that. I've talked about this in my reviews, because actually like the season finale / series finale actually aired at the time of me recording this. I don't know whether this is going to go up Wednesday or maybe it'll go up Friday. Either way. But I talked about this in my reviews. The problem, the situation with the series isn't necessarily poor reviews or reception, or it's not even necessarily numbers. There's extenuating circumstances. The show is just like, basically the understanding I have of it is that basically the show was too expensive from the perspective of it's a show that had to halt because of the pandemic, and they had to hold a lot of the cast, and that takes a lot of money to hold a cast, to like make sure that you set them aside so that they can come back and fulfill the obligations for said show. So that makes the show a lot more expensive. It was just another show that was impacted because of the pandemic, and so that's where the show currently finds why it, you know, ended up being a big contributor as to why it ended up getting canceled. I have also talked about this. There have been talks about it potentially finding its way onto another streaming platform. Obviously, the one I've talked about and other people have potentially talked about is maybe HBO Max, simply because this is based on a comic which we'll get to later. It is a Vertigo comic, which obviously puts it under the DC umbrella, which DC is owned by, is under Warner Brothers, which, to be fair, it could always end up on Netflix too, because Netflix does have rights to other like DC properties like the Lucifer series, as well as the upcoming Sandman series. As I just brought up, the series is based on a comic book that is done. So it is that thing of, well, if you can't get the completion of the story television-wise, you can get it comic book wise, because the comic is done. It's been done for years, but the problem is, like, because Y: Last Man itself as a property of getting adapted, it's been something people have been attempting for the past like decade. Like, it was supposed to start off as a movie, and then eventually like it got shifted over to a TV show. But there's also been like so many people attached to the project that were no longer attached, so the show just went through like kind of that purgatory a little bit of like, you know, so, and just to kind of end up where it is after finally getting made, just to kind of be canceled at its first season. So I wouldn't want the show just to come back for a second season. I would want the show to have a full life. Obviously, once again, I am basing all this information based on what we are seeing currently. At the time of me recording this, the news is kind of still stayed in it. It's still in that cancel period. So we haven't, at the time of recording this, there hasn't been any updates on whether anyone else has kind of decided to pick the show up. I really do hope that change. I hope the show, once again, doesn't just get a second season. However many seasons it takes them to tell the full story, whether it's 3 seasons, as I said, or like 5 seasons, whatever the case may be, they need to tell the full story of this series. So I'd like this show to have a chance as, this adaptation, just, because of everything that's kind of going into trying getting this adapted, and just for it to kind of end like this is kind of a bummer, especially where the series ends off on some very interesting elements for a lot of the main characters and where their stories have left them, that I want to be able to see that kind of go forward. Once again, though, I am saying, like, if the show does sadly never get another opportunity, it does exist in the form of a comic, so you could get the conclusion to the story that way. And the entire comic book series is done, so you could read it beginning to end. But like I said, I'm still got my fingers crossed, hoping that the show gets a second chance, because it's a really good show that deserves an opportunity to have a proper ending and get to fully tell the entire story. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. The next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good